Today's video could be titled Spicer Made, as the work is already done, but today's video is all about some adaptive music that I made for Hit and Bit, a 2.5D RPG Metroidvania game from Digital Scorpion Interactive. If you're new to adaptive music, which is what we're going to be talking about today, I highly recommend Winifred Phillips' book, A Composer's Guide to Game Music, which is the book that got me into non-linear writing and game audio in general, and it's an excellent starting point for just some of the concepts that we talk about today. The bulk of this video is from the Twitch stream that we did on the official DSI Twitch channel, which I encourage you to follow for behind the scenes game dev stuff, not just audio, but like art and level design and all sorts of stuff. As of recording this right now, the stream happens every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So search DigiScorp on Twitch or click the link that I'll put in the description. For the stream, I was joined by DSI's audio lead, Adam Brown, as well as Aric Hood, who is the company's co-founder and creative director. We talk about all the music that I wrote and assembled in Fmod for the first area of the game called Cerulus, as well as Adam's main menu music and a sneak peek of the music that he wrote for the next area of the game that's in development, Merwell. So here we go. All right. So yeah, today I'm just gonna go through some of the music that I wrote for Cerulus for the MVP. And yeah, it's just kind of like a peek behind the curtain of like something like this might work in Fmod. This is and I guess it's going to be kind of informal, I suppose, just in that we can take questions, and Adam's here, our audio lead, to kind of help with that and keep me on track, I guess. Thank you, Adam. Just interrupt me if like I'm just gonna talk about it, and then interrupt me with questions as we go. And so where should I start? I was gonna kind of go through everything in order as it happens in the actual game. Do you want to we could listen to the whole loop first and then we can talk about it, I suppose?
Let's do it.
Cool. All right, so we're going from the first thing you hear after you click on the start game button. So we're going from no music to overworld music. Well, I mean, you know, you go for a lot of RPG stuff, like the kind of tropes, I suppose. I think of the city is like this floating city, so it's sort of this, heavenly kind of sound, which is where the harp comes from. Strings, it's kind of floaty. And then, yeah, there was the direction of like kind of have a vibe of, you know, you're getting ready to go on this grand adventure, so it's like this sort of go forth vibe, you know. So it's like the marcato strings create like some momentum. Cool. So that's the basic loop of that. Nailed it. We nailed it, you guys. Yeah, and it's interesting. This stage of writing is kind of like formative, right? So like stuff that like motifs and instrumentation and overall vibe that we do now in this stage is kind of like set what the rest of Cerulus would sound like, you know. So and then that's going to be, you know, as we, you know, work through the game, I'm sure that'll zoom out further, and there'll be like similarities between different areas of the game too. So, and yeah, so like this, if you'll see, and I don't know how much we want to get into like the technicalities of Fmod, but like everything in Cerulus is controlled in this master event in Fmod. So it's Cerulus MX Master. Um, and all these ones you see here that are referenced are all nested within this. So all the little yellow ones you see here are, this is overworld. This is what we're just listening to. So and this is the loop region. You'll notice that when I start it, when I go from no music here, so I hit play, we have actually I should touch on that. So we have a no music region, loop region, to just be able to have the option of going from no music to a track, which is just kind of like good practice. But yeah, and it allows for, we specifically needed it for the very first thing in the game, which was this transition into the overworld loop. So like if I go to this here, this is the nested event. Like it just plays, you'll see that it just plays it right from the loop point. Whereas here, if we go from no music to there, we have this little lead in. Which I think sounds a little better. And that's just to kind of, it just feels better. It just feels more like an intro into the whole thing. And that exists in this little area here, which is this little transition. So this is going from no music on the left to the destination, which is overworld music on the right, and contained within that is this little transition thing. So we have this little transition that leads into the track. So then that'll play just the first time, and then when the music loops back around, it goes to the loop point. It doesn't do this part. So yeah, that's transition. So we have this overworld music, which is kind of the most involved track, and the one that kind of changes the most within Cerulus. So overworld kind of takes up the top half of Cerulus, and it goes through like the palace, this sort of combat state, and then it has a bunch of other layers that come in and out, and also it kind of shifts into this marketplace thing. So all of this is one track, but we have different, it evolves in that it, like, tracks fade in and out depending on what the needs of the scene are. So so if we play it just with just regular, this is just sort of the default what you hear. There's a section at the beginning where we go into a training montage where it's sort of more military and combat stuff. So what I did was I kept the Mercado thing going. I dropped out the other tracks and added some percussion stuff. And I want to make sure I get the right one. I want to say it's this one. Let's hope it's this one. Yeah, there it is. So I'll go back and forth between the two, but you'll hear the same track, but a different vibe for the same track. So these things share the same harmony. These two tracks share the same, like, if you listen to the Mercado strings, they're present the whole time. So it's just to facilitate like a smooth transition from being like in adventure mode to, okay, now I'm in a training session. Do one more. And we could have tackled that a couple different ways. Like we could have done what I call a horizontal event, or like a break-off event that's not stacked vertically within this. But the tune worked with that. So, and something that's like atonal, like percussion, it's kind of more, it's easier to just kind of insert that over something else. So we think about all this stuff as either vertical or horizontal or a combination of the two. So um, this is sort of horizontally speaking, like that transition we heard going into the overworld music. That was like a little, it was placed to the left of it horizontally. So and passes through it, then you go to a different track. So it's like it's the music is changing, but it's more in like a horizontal, isolated way, whereas the vertical stuff fade in and out, that way. So, yeah.
If you have time, do you want to show the overworld event? Since we can only see currently that that one single reference to an event, maybe show some of the automation and stuff so that any viewers can actually get a sense for what about it is like vertical or something, or what that's actually doing.
Sure, actually, yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. That's why I brought him here, folks.
The man who knows all.
So yeah, the parameters. So it's in a different order on this page, which is annoying, but so if I go to well, you can't see the automation, but I'm changing the same parameter there that I was. But if I go, Ceruleus combat training. Do I have to
just expand those like that little arrow?
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So here you'll see.
Look at those beautiful curves.
We'll ignore Bagpipe Man for a second.
Yeah.
We don't need Town Square. We don't need that one. Okay. Can I zoom out vertically on this? Do you think maybe I could just drop this down for a second? Let's hope I know how to get that back.
It's the here D key.
Okay.
D for dock.
Oh, excellent. Yep. Look at that.
Yep.
Learning new things. There we go.
Point 2 for Adam. All right. So if you're I'm not going to go super into Fmod stuff, but where a lot of audio people are familiar with a timeline in an audio workstation being left to right is just the passage of time, whereas in a parameter sheet it looks the same and there's a playhead, but this doesn't represent time anymore. This represents one parameter to another parameter.
Yes, Fmod's all sorts of confusing if you're an adult.
Yeah. Yeah, visually it's like
it looks the same. Why doesn't it work?
Yeah. So you'll see when this specific parameter is to show the difference between just the regular overworld music and going into combat. So this is regular overworld, and then I'm going to switch combat to 1, and there's going to be a seek speed little delay thing that drags this across and fades in the combat tracks. So if I look at the actual, like combat percussion, Mercado string stays the same.
Now, when recording this, what did you use?
So this is a combination of East-West, like orchestral. Well, actually, specifically the combat one, or just in general?
In general.
I used a lot of East-West Composer Cloud stuff and Spitfire. Specifically, the Mercado strings are just Abbey Road 2. And I needed, because you get a lot out of the East-West thing, but for like close-up strings and like kind of chamber-sounding strings, the Abbey Road was a good one. And they also used, and that's Spitfire, Abbey Road 2 Spitfire. And I also used this, I think was, so it was, I think, Lord of the Toms from East West for the Toms. And then it was a drumline plugin from Spitfire. And then some orchestral cymbals and stuff.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically like going from, this is how we draw the automation and set up going from one thing to another. Like I in my DAW, I'm creating this alongside the other tracks to make sure I'm composing it in a way that makes it fit no matter where it is, right? There's no clashing or anything. And then I'm exporting it to this, and we put it into this we create a parameter and then define like we want this to, you know, fade in over this many seconds, fade out. So yeah, not to get too far into it. And the cool thing about that too is like writing on top of the existing track kind of like retains the vibe of the track because it's still you're training, but it's still this like, you know, getting ready to go on an adventure vibe, you know.
Yeah, just to be clear for the viewers, so you know, he's mentioned vertical and horizontal music. You know, that's referring to vertical and horizontal additive or adaptive music.
Yeah.
And right there, we were taking a look at vertical, and so you can think of the music as having different layers that work on top of each other because they were made together, and you either add or subtract some of those depending on what's going on in the game at that time. So it's like you're, you know, I guess like you're building some pyramid upwards, or you're taking the top off sometimes, you know, and you're just left with the base, you know, something kind of like that.
Yeah, and it's like you could go like the simplest version of that is if you had, I want this track to start less intense, go to medium intense, and end in high intensity. Well, you could just add A, B, and C in a, you know, summative way, or like, you know, with this kind of thing, you can take away tracks, you can add tracks, you could retain tracks between two states, and any combination of those things. So, this is why I feel like this is why you want to. I got so excited when I learned about FMod a couple years ago. It's like this is, or just adaptive music in general.
Now, how does FMod compare to Wise? Because I've noticed a lot of people in the industry is now Wise.
Well, Adam and I were just talking about that yesterday. More clicking. No, I want to get Adam's input on this, and you should give more weight to Adam's input on this, I would think. It seems like FMod is kind of created by people who are starting in the audio realm and kind of bridging the gap toward everybody else, and then Wise kind of seems like it's the opposite direction, you know, just because visually it's more hierarchy. Like the whole thing looks like the events tab to me. It's like events tab and then like boxes within boxes within boxes, whereas FMod is sort of geared toward looking like a DAW, you know. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I know that when I'm working in Wise, like there's definitely a lot more pages and like layouts and stuff that, you know, I have to go through in order to make sure things are hooked up, which is fairly easy to do if you have a background in programming and stuff, because like you understand how things are supposed to hook up to each other, and how like maybe audio is not just audio. Maybe part of it is just audio, but then you also have to keep track of the instance of that audio and then playing of that instance, and there's a lot to to kind of keep track of. Versus FMod is a little more straight to the point. I've heard it mentioned like this when people have talked about which should I learn first, Wise or FMod. Okay, if you're coming to this company, definitely FMod, because that's what we use here. I've heard that, you know, Wise will take you a lot longer to learn, so it's good to spend time on that, because if you understand Wise, you can learn FMod in like 2 days. Versus if you only know FMod and you try to go learn Wise, it'll take you much longer. That being said, Wise has some more features, you know, that you can make use of, and it's getting pretty tightly integrated with the other softwares that we use now, which is pretty cool. But on the other hand, too, I think for beginners, FMod has more resources that are more accessible to you know, beginners to learn what they're doing in this. And so I'm glad that I've learned FMod this early as well, because it's those tutorials have just deepened my knowledge of how game audio is supposed to work, what the end result is. And then when you know that end result and you take that over to Wise, well, you know now what to search for you know, what to look up, like how do I do this. So
now, from an implementation standpoint, what software is better?
I feel like that's just almost the same, because it's you're essentially saying, you know, you're using a bank and you're saying create that, like it's all the same C# code at that point, isn't it? Would you say?
yeah, I
Is
think
Fmod built
that's
off of C#?
What's that?
Is Fmod built off of C#?
Oh, I don't know. That's
no, but the
connecting it to the project.
Gotcha.
but the Fmod Unity plugins and stuff that we're using in the project are, or at least the kind of the back end of the code, the helper functions and stuff are written in C#. I don't know if you could pick a better one, because you know, I mean, they just both bring something different to the table. You know, Wise is more expensive than Fmod for game studios.
Yes.
So so where there's so it's, you just have to, just like anything, weigh the pros and cons for your, you know, situation, in my opinion.
Well, and I think it's a little bit like, you know, Pro Tools versus Logic versus, but like, you know, there's pricing and then there's functionality, and it's like all these programs are constantly evolving too. So it's like, you know, I don't know if like I'm trying to compare it to like music school, where it was like if Sibelius was around longer than Finale, and which one was better when, and you know,
so,
I don't know. I think these things change over time. All right, should we?
Let's continue. Let's go into the tavern music. I'm curious to see what this sounds like.
Well, I was just gonna, before we leave the palace.
Okay.
There was. I just wanted to show a little thing of. So there's a part in the game where you walk past a little man playing bagpipes, and I thought it would be cool, and actually kind of necessary, because how else would you do it? To have a bagpipe layer be playing in the main music event as a 3D event. So do we kind of, should I explain like 2D sounds versus 3D sounds, or so 2D just means like it's a static mix, in that, like, say you had a panning knob that like pan things left and right in your headphones or speakers. If it's a 2D sound, it's just like listening to music that doesn't have that. If you have a 3D sound, you have this functionality where if you are moving through space and the object is like moving past you left to right, then you hear it in your headphones left to right. Which is like commonplace now in like a lot of, like I was playing Ori last night, the second one, and just the subtle like panning that happens like when you're running through whatever you're fighting people. It's just like if an enemy jumps over you from right to left, you hear it, like their sound effects, you know, moving. So but in a subtle way. But anyway, so 2D sounds are just like, you know, music would all be 2D sounds. A lot of ambience is 2D, whereas things that require spatiality is that a word? That require like existence in the world, then you have them as 3D sounds, so they're an emitter. So basically, like I have this, it's the same music over the bagpipe layer, so I'll play it. But you have, so this is as if it was a 2D sound, but because on the bagpipe layer, we have the 3D, what would you call that? Whatever, 3D emitter. I can test this by moving this around. And if you're listening on headphones, you can hear the bagpipes moving left and right. So like, you'll be like, Hit will be walking to the right. Here comes the bagpipe man. Now we're right next to him, and now we're passive. And then off he goes. Let's go to tavern music. So this one was one that, well, let's just listen to it first. Oh god, what did I do?
Oh no, it's a broken record.
Bring back vinyl. There we go.
Vinyl has made a comeback.
Sure has.
It kind of almost feels like empty, but that could just be because of what's, you know, actively playing right now. Do you kind of want to just give a more explanation on how this specific
Yeah,
event
like,
is
so,
made?
As to why that is.
Yeah.
So I think you're kind of like, you meaning like the reverb, kind of like the ambient kind of sound to it, as far as the emptiness? Or
Well, I think what he's getting at is the whole
The
like this.
randomization of playing and not playing certain tracks in that event.
Okay.
Yeah.
well, this one isn't randomized.
Oh, it's not.
That's
okay.
Nope.
that's just how it has
Okay.
people dropping in and out. But
Mm-hmm. But this music doesn't exist in a vacuum in the
Yeah.
tavern, does it?
I don't believe so. No.
well, what do you mean by that?
Well,
I mean, a
we've got
couple things.
character sounds going on in there,
Right.
and we've also got
I see.
ambience of different types, you know, going on in there. Ambience being like, you know, what does this room sound like? What's going on in it?
Exactly.
You know, and those come from the sound design part of the audio team.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Whoever's assigned to that at, you know, for the given area. And so we have to make sure that, you know, unlike producing an album, that the music isn't necessarily taking up all of the sonic space.
Yes. Well, and so a big part of that is reverb, but
Mhm.
it's also like, so if you listen to everyone's favorite track, Overworld Music,
It is
Like, it
frequently
has-
stuck in my head.
it's you're definitely outside, right?
Mhm.
It feels like. Whereas the tavern music was meant to it was meant to sound like there's actually someone in the corner, like a little band in the corner playing some stuff.
Right.
Which is bonus points to anyone who knows the word for that. It's a film scoring term. Starts with the letter D. I'll come back to that.
Wait, can you repeat
Eric
that?
will-
I'm
Eric will
curious.
send you $100 if you guess the word.
Hey, what? You think I have $100 to spend?
It'll be counterfeit, but
I'll give you Monopoly money. It might take me
So-
a while to find some.
so it's cues, like sound cues and music stuff. Diegetic is the word I'm looking for. So a diegetic, I always confuse the non and the maybe Adam, if you could look that up. If something is diegetic, it's outside of the. I might be saying the opposite of the truth. It's outside of the action of the scene, whereas non-diegetic it's like planted in the scene. Is it the opposite?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the opposite. So diegetic means like, so that if you're watching a movie and there's a radio playing, if in the scene standing next to the character, that is a diegetic sound. The character in the movie knows that there's music coming out of that.
Yep,
And
the
then
audience
we've all seen
and the
it.
character.
Yeah,
Yep.
the audience and the character. Whereas if you go non-diegetic, like we've all seen those movies where it takes like a scene like that and then fades into like that track, but like now becomes the soundtrack. So it's going from diegetic to non-diegetic. But anyway, so I wanted to make the tavern music kind of sound more diegetic in that. And I gave it a smaller room reverb, and you know, instrumentation is just kind of more bare.
Now, an
kind of-
additional thing we could possibly do is turn that into a 3D emitted sound that sits in the corner.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
If you want to make it truly diegetic. Because
And
right
I
now,
mean,
like when you enter the tavern, it's just there.
Mhm.
It's awesome, but it is just there. You hear it no matter the same volume, no matter where you're at.
Yeah. So we could tool around with that a little bit. I mean, maybe even make a little. I don't want to create more work for the for the art team, but you know, We make a little
Make
band.
a little
I
band
don't know.
playing.
So someone is asking, is it common to notch the music to allow frequencies on common character sound effects to come through more clearly? So similar to comb filtering.
Yeah. Is it common? I mean, as far as where we are in this project, not yet. But definitely, like, that's definitely a thing.
Mhm.
As far as like giving kind of characters their own EQ, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think one thing important on this project too. So Fmod doesn't have, for instance, a dynamic EQ. So we don't have like track space or something living inside of the Fmod mix, but we do have the ability to sidechain for compression's sake and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'll have to double check if we can sidechain an EQ, but I don't believe we can. So there's some ducking to essentially prioritize what buses are, definitely meant to be heard.
Yeah.
But we also want that to be a bit transparent. So you also have to writing music for this case is very different, especially from a mix perspective. Like you might end up with some bare frequencies. You might end up with maybe imaging would be different where something's not necessarily down the middle, but it's rather kind of pushed out to the sides a little bit because your character is going to be close to down the middle.
Yeah.
So
It's like film scoring, like that's right out of film scoring. How you mix that.
Yeah, so it's just taking a different approach, to it to make, and being able to coordinate that across the team.
Well, it is different too because we don't necessarily have dialogue in the traditional sense, like of actually hearing someone's voice. So it's like where you take the dialogue is king thing from film scoring, TV and stuff.
Well,
it's
a lot of
little different here.
A lot of days in film scoring, you're mixing on almost surround because of you're mixing for a theater, so they got speakers everywhere nowadays. So your main dialogue is going to be directly behind the screen, whereas your music and sound effects, depending on where they're located in the scene that you're watching, could be all around you.
Yeah exactly. All right. That's the kind of vibe. It like tavern music was almost kind of meant to be ambient in that it's a little bit diegetic. So it was meant to kind of give the idea of the space that you're in. You go in. The other thing was because when I was playtesting it, I found myself going in and out of the tavern a couple times, more than other buildings in the game. And so I was like, I don't know if I wanted to start at the very beginning of the track each time. So if you'll notice when I actually hit play, it starts in different spots. And this was a personal choice. Actually, it might not do that. For some reason, it's doing just the same area, but there we go.
It's randomizing, but not that random.
It's randomized. This playhead isn't moving; it's just playing it as is. But you're looking for this little thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to give the impression that you were just walking into a tavern where things were already happening. So I wanted to not start exactly when you walk in.
You want to talk about the challenge of loops?
Sure.
Loop? Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, it's hard to show in Fmod. It's probably
you can just talk about it.
Yeah. So I mean, it's making things seamlessly loop. It's not. You just have to know what to do. But it's if you're not used to making something loop seamlessly, the thing about if I wrote this music in a DAW, and I selected the region. I'll just use this as an example. Selected the loop region above it, like in Logic, what I use. Put that over there. I hit bounce, and I bounce the track. And I'm like, okay, because that like loops back to here, and I don't hear anything wrong with it in the DAW.
Mm-hmm.
So I bounce it, and then I put it into F mod, and then all of a sudden, when I get to when I play it here and it loops back, all of the reverb tail and all of the extra stuff that happens at the end of a track, like if I just stop, if you're playing an instrument and you stop, like instantly, there's still a little bit of a tail that holds over. So you have to kind of have that exist in your DAW after the loop, cut that off, and then put it underneath the beginning of it, so that when it starts playing, it'll just be seamless. It'll seem like it doesn't actually loop at all.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Dougman is asking Adam, you were looking into like Japanese scales and music ideas. Will we see a more Eastern inspired area, or is it more for creating a more unique atmosphere?
Oh, that's definitely a question for Aric as the chief creative officer, because he's most familiar with just with all of the areas of the game that I haven't even had a chance to get to yet, because this is a very long production cycle, to put out a whole game.
Yeah.
For me, I just wanted to be more influenced by some Japanese theory, so that I could bring. Well, okay, so as a composer, you always have to. You can either emulate and do stuff quickly, or sometimes if you're feeling like artistic, you can try to, I guess, get yourself in an artistic mindset by saying like, hey, these are my natural tendencies. How do I create a humongous stumbling block for myself so that I don't feed those natural tendencies? How do I do something completely different? And for me, that was like looking into just a different way of processing the same notes, that we've been using our whole lives. And just by seeing them from a different perspective that still has some order to it, just produces different ideas for me. So I will still be doing that regardless of whether something is meant to sound Eastern or not. Just because I think that the chord changes and the harmony move in interesting ways.
Mm-hmm. Now, going off of that, as I am the creative head of this company, I would like to see, kind of some of the areas that we build out in the world to have influences from areas of our world. But the challenge is, you don't want to come off as too cliche and kind of make it sound like we're, if we do try to do it, you want to do it right. You don't want to, have that issue where, it sound like we're making fun of it when we're not, where, we're trying to, observe, that culture without, throwing ourselves, under the bus for not looking good, that kind of thing.
I think you can do that too with like combining, if you wanted to write a tune with a zither in it, and like, it's like that could be an homage to a certain area that exists in the world, but then you're combining it with other instruments, your drum set, like whatever. I think a lot of this depends on the art that we're looking at too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wouldn't have written, like I got it narrowed it down so much seeing, the graphics of Cerulus and seeing gameplay and, all the stuff.
Yes, thank you, our team.
Yeah. So we were traveling through the overworld music. There's a part in the game where you're kind of lowering down into the marketplace, from the upper crust of the world, the palace area, where it's a little fancier and a little, whatever. So it was meant to sound busier. So I wanted to put more like melodic material in there, and I wanted it to sound a kind of the same kind of vibe as the tavern music, but just less like diegetic, I guess. So yeah, so we have our regular music, and then the town square layer that comes in over top of that. And I said zither because that segued into this, because I used a zither to take over the melody. Although it's played kind of more like a dulcimer, so.
Nice.
But yeah, so like those two layers. This is more like we're out on an adventure, and now we're gonna go just stop by the shop real quick. Lots of stuff going on. And the tambourine to me just kind of like reminds me of coins and stuff. What was the other thing? So the part where you are, well, so yeah, I wanted to say, so there's a part where you go to the elemental study, which is this magical building that has a bunch of floating things. It's very Harry Potter kind of like weird things are happening, but everyone's just okay with it kind of vibe. It's like all this stuff floating in the middle of the room. So it's like magical and like, you know, it has like a sort of air of mystery about it. So I wanted to have a layer as you approach the elemental study, that have a layer in the music that's going that kind of leads into the separate music of the elemental study. So basically it's the overworld music, and then you hear this as you approach, you hear this other layer come in. Little glockenspiel. So it's not meant to like bash you over the head with like everything's magic now, but it's just a little thing kind of dancing around, whatever. So you go from this to elemental study music. Which Eric gave me the notes, kind of like, you know, definitely like magic, Harry Potter vibes, Ollivander's wand shop, you know.
It's very it sounds almost mysterious like.
Yeah. So like, you know, arpeggiated flute stuff. Glockenspiel for sure. Glockenspiel's like sparkly and magical. Anyway, Danielle. Cool.
Literally, bro
So,
is saying they love the elemental study music so much.
thank
Now
you.
I wonder who that could be.
Thanks, Mom. My baby boy did such a good job. Well, what was the other thing? Okay, yeah. So then, Lower Cerulus. I did the sort of method that Adam did with creating a bunch of sort of atonal percussive transitions that, and I can actually show you here, that will work with multiple, like going between multiple tracks. So if you see all the green loop regions are, you know, we're sitting in Lower Cerulus and we want to go to no music. Well, that requires a transition because we don't just want to flip a switch and have it go instantaneously, because that thing leads to pops and all sorts of nastiness. So we want to have at least a crossfade, if not
Ooh, we got a new follower.
Hey, we did it. But yeah, so like a lot of these are just crossfades because that's all it calls for. But some of them are more involved. Like if you hear going from Cerulus to the elemental study. So if I go And actually, you heard one there too. So I'll just go back and forth. So elemental study, you'll hear a cymbal scrape or roll. Sorry. And then if I go back to overworld, it's a cymbal roll plus a little bass drum. And that's just to add a little more than just a crossfade, you know. And that's what these kind of transitions are for.
It's like a drummer's fill or something like that.
Yeah, it just kind of puts a button on it, and it also conceals any if you did have some kind of like weird stuff that clashed. Because the other thing too is like if this stuff is randomized, you could be entering a different area at any point in the track, right? So there's any number of possibilities of little dissonant clashes type thing that you want to avoid. So having something covered up is good. So we have like that's one. You know, just something that kind of bridges the gap, you know, smooths it over. Anyway, so going from Overworld into Lower Cerulus. This will be the last time you hear that. Sorry. So here's going into Lower Cerulus. It's just more kind of like a more working class area.
Very industrial.
Yeah. So I have like a little anvil playing in the background. I actually have, that's another east-west thing, is it's a plugin called Clockwork, I think, and it's just literally clock noises. Like somebody took a grandfather clock and recorded a bunch of clicks and pops.
Is that what that ticking is?
Yeah, the ticking is literally actually a clock.
That's actually kind of cool.
And then the cymbal, I put a little more symbols in this just because it sort of reminded me of like, you know, steam coming out of a pipe kind of thing.
Yeah. So Doug, my man, is suggesting like possibly adding silence as a transition.
I would chime in on that one. You have to consider the psychology and everything, around game design here. Music and sound has the responsibility of keeping you immersed in the story. Part of that is that, it's not supposed to be the thing that takes your attention, right? The gameplay, the level design, the story is supposed to be what you're focusing on. However, when the sounds in the room around you become louder than the audio in the game at any given time, it breaks the immersion because you start paying attention to all the things around you that you have to do, or, you might notice that, I don't know, just something in the room, you're like, oh man, maybe I have other responsibilities. Well, when you're playing a game or something like that, we actually don't want you to do that. We want you to stay in the game for as long as possible and have this experience. So
don't worry about that baby.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you in some points. Like I was playing Hollow Knight. Nick can yell at me because I haven't played that much of it. But when I have played Hollow Knight, I fell in love with the music in the game so much. I'll just stand there and listen to it, not even move, because it is that awesome.
Yeah.
So it's audio,
and that's fine. I would just recommend not going to silence in general, unless it's for a great effect that you don't overuse, because it could break immersion when there's no sound. And this, I think there was even a paper out on that, because as we have more game audio schools, I mean, they're just being birthed right now. It's not like they've been around forever. But as programs are opening up at certain universities and stuff like that, there are also people studying the effects of audio in games. And so at least if anybody attends Game SoundCon every year, or probably even GDC, what is that, Game Dev Convention, is that what it's called? Then you might see some you might hear some presentations of papers or something that come from academic institutions talking about this very thing. And I had never thought about it before until somebody presented that. I was like, whoa, that's a really good point.
I think, and I've just recently, sort of, this is a tangent, I won't go too far, but like recently I was talking to one of my students about use of silence in, not even just in music, but in like sound design also. And she's a comp student, but I was talking to her about feedback I got from Daniel Kim at Riot, who I just sort of started, I messaged him and I was like, can I get some feedback on my reel? And he sent me this amazing video of just like him going through my reel and just talking about stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's amazing that this guy would just do that, which is,
Yeah.
that's another really cool part of this industry, is that you'll have people that are just like, yeah, I'll help. What do you need? You know, like, I'm like, really? So, but he was saying, I sent him, it was a Halo. I did a sound redesign on a Halo trailer. And there's the whole, it's like this big action sequence. There's a lot of stuff going on. And that ends with like this grenade going off. And he was like, why don't you use, like, there's all this stuff going on leading up to this explosion, which is like this sort of, you know, it's the story beat of this particular scene. And he's like, why don't you just have everything kind of just the air suck out of the room in the instant before the grenade goes off? And what that does is it draws your attention immediately, because all of a sudden there's nothing going on. And now, boom, the grenade goes off. So it creates a more, a bigger leap from nothing to the larger sound, right? So it's like, gives it more emphasis. Anyway, yeah. So, but like the same thing could be said for the use of like in a pop tune, if you have beat 1 be nothing, and then the band comes back in on beat 3, like that has a lot of like impact, because it's like, oh, we were all expecting you to come in on 1, you know. So it's use of silence as a it's just, yeah.
Do you think you would use pure silence or relative silence? Relative silence being that,
relative,
like,
I suppose, depending on the situation.
Yeah, because you could still have the noise floor not go to 0, but still have it sound like silence if all you were left if all you were left with is like room sound for a specific instant, you know, like, or, you know, I don't know, like that sucking air out, you know, maybe travels down in frequency. So if it's the one thing going on, it's going to feel like relative silence, or it doesn't quite go to 0 or something like that. So I was just curious what you would do and what you ended up doing on that
specific
redesign.
Halo thing. Yeah, on the Halo thing, it was I went with pretty much absolute silence, because I didn't want there to be any ambience, because it's sort of, it was less about realism and more about like attention, you know.
Awesome. Yep.
So like it was just like, we want it to be like, oh, this grenade's about to go off. You know, I could have maybe, like, one thing I was considering, I remember this now, of having complete silence and literally a little shh noise, and then to silence. But then I was like, should I have like a little high pitched, like, you know, like one of the Saving Private Ryan noise, whatever.
Yeah.
Flashbang, not flashbang. Yeah. Anyway, but then I ended up just doing, I think complete silence. I don't know. I could be now that I need to go look at it, because I don't know if I maybe I do.
No, that's okay. I just find that interesting. So
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
It was more about like the viewer and going with what the audience is kind of feeling. Anyway, yeah. Cool. So then, so that's like, we went with like more industrial or whatever. So, Lower Cerulus, Hit, our hero, is chasing down. She ends up chasing, or not chasing, I guess, more going through this kind of gauntlet where she's being attacked by thieves and whatnot. So, and it's the instruction was to go from less intensity to more intensity, kind of like we were talking about before. So I have this Lower Cerulus thing, and what we have up here, these three parameters at the top here, are just these little extra subtle layers that I added to just build up a little more tension while keeping the track going. So if we go to Lower Cerulus, everything's cool, people working and whatnot, and then it's like, might be trouble. So we have a little choir kind of just, and it's not to say like it's dissonant necessarily, but I tried to keep like the voicings kind of close together to kind of create a little bit of dissonance without being too heavy-handed with it. So less like terror and more just like worrisome, I guess. And then the second layer that comes in as you go is just to add a little more busyness. And this, I think, was a waterphone.
It sounds like someone's just like, rapping with drumsticks on like
Yeah.
one of those pipe stairs.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, actually. No, but yeah, it's a waterphone percussion, I think is what it is. And then, yeah, so you're continuing down and then a little more tension. This one was actually supposed to be a little more like, oh, it's, now we're stressed. And all with the direction of not being more stressful than the boss music. And then so I'll keep playing this and then go into the boss music so you can get a transition. So it's like you're imagining going through and, fighting these people. You get to the point with the boss. And I actually used one of Adam's transitions from Orwell for this, just because it worked really well. So I was like, I'll just use that. All right, so then we go to Boss Thief. So then this is the final thing that happens.
Get ready.
Ready? So just similar stuff, like a lot of, there's some tropes, choir, choir being, separate.
It's that what they call epic sound.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
A lot of low end, forceful percussion. And also the loop is a little shorter because, you're not going to be in the boss battle as long as you're in like the schools, for instance. Yeah. Cool. So that's basically it. Oh, and there was the tavern fight also. I forgot.
Yeah,
but...
you missed one there.
I should have ended with the boss thief though.
Oh no.
Okay, it's all right. Here, I'll show you. Here's a less stressful fight. It's a happy fight. So you'd hear this transition. Well, so that one I'll just let it play for a second. So a bunch of hooligans, bunch of miscreants.
Slap happy fight.
Yeah, had too many at the bar coming at you. And again, like a shorter loop because you're not in it quite as long. But then it would go like, oh, fight's over. Go back. And so the instrumentation I tried to keep a similar instrumentation for the tavern fight. I added like the Mercado string stuff. Tension and stuff, but I had the flute in there, for instance, or what I think it's bass recorder or something. I think we landed on. But yeah, that with the intensity levels, that's another thing that you sort of learn just from. I mean, good arranging will have highs and lows. Like, there's a really good book called Inside the Score. It's by Rayburn Wright, I think. Okay. And it analyzes. I went to jazz school, so that's where I'm coming from. But it analyzes like scores by Sammy Nestico, Thad Jones, and he puts these graphics in there that's like they're showing like energy levels, dynamic levels of the entire song. From beginning to end, and it's like it's shit you could trace like how they arranged it in a way that it's a little bit like writing a screenplay. There's like different acts and like not like a 3-act structure or anything, but like, you know, they plan out like this is going to be big here, and then we drop off, and then we're building back up over this section, blah blah blah.
Right.
It's a similar way when you're thinking about what vibe you're going for. If I'm thinking about this whole project as one track, you know, the high point is the boss. You don't want anything to be more energetic and bigger than the boss battle, because you know, it's kind of like what just happened. We went from big boss battle to less stressful. You know, it's less satisfying, right? You want a big finish, right? So it's just stuff to consider when you're writing that kind of thing. So
awesome.
We don't have the whole system set up yet. Did you want to, Adam? Can we show some of your music?
Oh, yeah, we can briefly, sure.
All right,
Do you
there's
do
one
the menu
F1.
or the Well,
Oh, definitely the menu, because that was the first thing I heard. Like when we joined the team, like as far as like getting a vibe of like,
okay, gotcha.
the stuff to write for Ceruleus. Yeah,
Gotcha.
But yeah, so I really like it. So yeah, this is the menu music here.
Okay.
And yeah, maybe Adam, you can talk about what happens when the loop region starts.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll just listen to it for a second.
Yeah. Because this is cool. Enjoy it.
Okay, so I'll talk over it from this point. So what's coming up is that the melody and stuff is split into different phrases, and they only have a chance of playing. It's not guaranteed that they will play. There's only a chance of them playing, so they'll light up if they're playing. See what happens this time.
Who knows?
Yep. Okay, so just the counter melody here.
Just kind of
Still just the counter melody. Yep. Nothing.
on break. Still on break.
Mm-hmm. See if one lights up.
Nope.
Nope.
They're striking now.
Yeah.
Choosing not to put
There we go.
counter melody.
Somebody showed up.
Yeah. Okay, last chance before I...
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. Here's a melody. And then that loops around like that, having, just having chance along the way. So, so what's the concept here? You can actually go ahead and stop it. You'd want to hit stop twice. Because the fade out's like 8 seconds, so you can hit stop twice and it'll immediately stop.
Yeah.
So we had a number of goals to accomplish on this one. For one, I tried to compose to let's just talk about the composition first. So I tried to compose to a concept, not like, here's maybe a key and a set of chords and let me just make something that works, No, so the scope that was given, the kind of the order was that, like, hey, this is a game that follows two different characters with different abilities, but they have parallel storylines, and they're related as well. So one of them can do magic, the other kind of does like melee fighter type stuff, and so so we had to like represent those two things happening at the same time, where there's also this sense of like adventure happening. So basically, this song was originally written on piano. Oops. It was originally written on piano, and the whole goal with it was that, like, okay, if the lower half of the arrangement, so like the low mids and stuff like that, has something minor happening, minor is like kind of sad sounding, then the upper voices, the higher stuff, should have something major sounding. And normally those would conflict with each other, and they kind of do in this song, but that's okay because it's giving you the feeling that we want you to have when you open this game.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, or at least, we think so.
You're kind of breaking theory rules, but there's a reason for it.
Yeah,
totally.
you've got that almost the rhythmic section of the bass and percussion dragon, and then you've
Yeah.
got like the kind of slow
Very nice.
melody type on the top,
Mhm.
or the mid. It kind of ties everything together, and then you have above that is the light, fluffy stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep, just got some pads there. Those are generally happier than all the stuff that happens down low.
Yeah.
Aric wanted kind of little bit of a superhero vibe as well, so he really liked keeping the timpani and stuff
Superhero.
in.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that day I had watched some gameplay from Marvel's Midnight Suns like for a few minutes, and so
Nice.
this French horn stuff was kind of just like at the ready for me. So this French horn melody exists in between those upper voices that are like happy when the lower ones are sad and stuff like that. So it kind of serves to bind them together, and so they meet at a point in the middle with a set of notes that kind of works with both sections at the same time. So that's that's what's going on compositionally, but even more importantly, under that blue bar off to the right, where so that blue bar denotes a section that loops, and it tells the software to loop that. So we chopped the melody up into phrases that fade in, fade out. Did this in the DAW. What's that?
Being Vanna White with the mouse right now. Ooh.
Oh yeah, and go ahead and click on one of those melody regions there to see what the % chance of playing is, and then hit D to bring up the dock.
Oh yeah.
So triggered behavior, if you want to expand that. Yeah, so each of these has a 65% chance of playing. So I won't even know what it is every time. But for these initial stages when people are playing the game, we want to give them the feeling from the get-go of what to.
A new follower.
Nice. We want to give them the idea of like what to expect. So for now, I wanted the song to play as written first, and then the chance allows it to sound more like a piece that has more variation and is written that way over a long period of time, so that it's not too repetitive if you sit on the menu screen for too long. I anticipate that in a future update, we'll just get rid of that first section where everything plays together, because players at a certain point will have interacted with our game enough to be familiar with it overall. And so rather than having it start exactly the same way every time, you would just cut to the loop section. But we're talking that's like for like updates once the game is released and people have started playing it, then it would make more sense to do that.
I mean,
to make it
I wouldn't
less.
I wouldn't cut it out completely, but I might shorten it. Because remember, you could
also do that.
You could have the music playing as it's loading into the game, initially loading in.
Sure. I think I know what you mean.
You can even like extend this like cutoff section to like here or something.
Yeah, could.
Like so.
Yeah, but I would find some way potentially to give players a different experience every time they load the game at some point in the future. So it's just on the table for some point, but that's long. That's long from now, I guess. It's going to be a long time.
Right.
Well, and you raise a good point about for why we do variety, because it's like it's listener fatigue, right? Like I think that a lot of, and I won't say it doesn't hurt my feelings as a composer, but the people will generally they tend to, if you play a game long enough, you're going to probably mute the music after a while of playing it, right? Like unless you're going through a bunch of areas, unless there's enough variety. Right?
It depends on the game too.
Depends on the game, sure.
Some games are like you're required to have the music there because there are specific cues in the music that tells you what's going to happen.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, and I just mean sort of like a generic kind of thing, but no, so to sort of keep them because we're composers, we want to have our stuff heard,
right?
We'll we want to create enough variety. You want to make the loops long enough and have enough
variation
just baked into it, but then doing things like this, having transitions that are randomized, so going from one track to another track, you have 3 or 4 different randomly triggered transitions, so that even that's Just the more variety. And then there's pitch and offset and all that stuff. Like that's why I did the tavern music that way.
Yep.
Just because variety, you know.
Now,
Yeah, and
do you
in
want
the future. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you want to show variety with your the Merwell mix? Because that's a lot.
Yeah, it would be better to have me show that just to be like, I guess, even faster with it. Would it be okay for me to do that? Like, can you switch streams like
you
that?
could just stream, if you want.
Okay.
Well, here's my other pitch. We're 20 minutes over. What if you did this? What if we did another one for Mirwell? We just did all of Cerulus. What if we did?
That's true. We can
another one in the future. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, a different different night.
Stream.
That's fine too. I mean, because there's a lot going on in that one, and I would have to, I guess I would just have to really pare it down. So
there is more than I thought. Like,
yeah,
a lot of stuff going on there.
That's just the hallway.
That's just the hallway. That's just the hallway. Yeah, a lot of it's built into that, but a lot of things are divided up and given a % chance of playing.
Yeah.
And then they contain further things that have a % chance of playing, so that as you're like dungeon crawling or whatever, you don't get bored if you're in the same thing. So it's kind of the vibe there. But yeah, maybe we should do another night just on that.
Yeah.
So
just out of curiosity, have you guys ever tried tallying the amount of possibilities there
are? No. I think if I had less to do in building the game, I think if I had less to do, I might do it. But it's like, okay, this is done and it serves our purposes. Let's go tackle the next task.
He's a busy guy. He's got to wrangle all of us. So
no, I get
it. No, awesome. I think that's that'll do it for that then. I was gonna say, if there's anybody like watching or listening that is sort of like brand new and like to adaptive music in general, I highly recommend the Winifred Phillips book, Composer's Guide to Game Music. It's a good introductory book to this type of thing, where she talks about the whole vertical horizontal thing is like big in that book. And it's interesting too, because like a lot of these things are very old concepts. Like they used to do, back in Mozart's day, they would have these random musical cards or whatever, where they would like basically do a horizontal event, but just by putting a card in front of the piano player.
We got
a
late follower.
There you go.
Nice.
Glad we stuck around. But anyway, yeah, highly recommend that book if you want to get into this stuff, because there's a lot of good concepts. All right. Cool.
Okay.
Thanks, gents.
I think that's it for tonight.
Yeah.
We'll table the rest for next time.
That's it. Thanks to Adam and Aric for joining me for the stream. And if you want to be a part of the stream and ask questions and be part of the discussion, follow Digital Scorpion Interactive on Twitch and check out their stream every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Links are in the description. Goodbye.